Welcome, everyone, to Here and Now. We're glad that you're joining us. This is Steve Struggle, and we have with us, of course, Dr. Abraheim. How are you doing today, Abraheim? How are you?
Well, at 77, I'm in pretty good shape, but I still have, some minor medical problems, that we were discussing previously. And really, like the healthcare system is not what it should be. But I'm in pretty good shape, and preparing to go to Palestine and Jerusalem, actually, to live, giving up on the Montreal left here, giving up on the Western left in general, actually, and going to work with the Palestinians and the Israeli opposition. That's where it counts, and that's where I'm going. But
You know, I think you're really right on that point. It, the U.S. war against Iran should have the same pivot tendency or the same trajectory as far as a center of international focus. In some camps, I think that is true, but the other camps who have the I hate Iran. Oh, that's the feedback. Hold on a second.
okay,
Is that all right?
how are you?
Okay, all right. Okay. So what I was saying was, I think you're right about the pivotal point of Palestine because it seems to be the war will become a pivotal point, but at least in the United States, the call of patriotism for the country and support for soldiers, especially now since apparently there's a mission ongoing right now, or was one ongoing in Iran to capture a prisoner. I just saw this on the Iranian news media.
Yeah,
It
pilot.
doesn't have the same polarization as Palestine.
Mhm.
It should, because it's actually worse to me. Because now you're simply attacking. And okay, I'm not saying that October 7th was an attack by Palestine on the Zionist forces. That's not what happened in Iran. Iran wasn't attacked by the United States and Israel on Iran. It's a different situation.
Mhm.
And to me, I'm not saying it's worse, but it takes on a different historical and political framing. That's all.
Yes. Uh, but Iran is the war in Iran, is a consequence of the resistance movement of the Palestinians in Gaza,
Yes, that's correct. That's
which could
correct.
not be defeated. And so
That's
the
correct.
support mechanism for the Palestinian resistance was attacked as a consequence of the failure to destroy the Palestinian resistance.
True.
Because,
That's true.
like, the, the Zionist regime, the Zionist state, and the Trump state, the czars to Trump there, the Trumpf, realize that they've bitten off more than they can chew. Another an American expression. And, uh, and so they had to take on Iran if they were going to defeat, the resistance in the other countries, because Iran was a stable center of Shiite jihadist international revolution against US imperialism. So they finally realized that they were serious and that they had the popular support to do so. And so they felt obliged to take on Iran without, even considering, that Iran, would have the wherewithal, to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Sort of, like a neurotic trance that the United States, put itself into between Trump and Hegseth, who believed, that who would dare, stand up, to the military might of the United States of America. Well, now they found out.
That's true. That's very true. Um, we have a story that hasn't really been covered well, at least in the United States. I received it from an ally via text message. A few days ago, a Mr. Mohammed Safa, a chief representative of the Patriotic Vision Organization at the UN, he resigned on March 30th, claiming that the UN is preparing for a potential nuclear strike on Iran. He wrote a letter of resignation and posted on X, and he said his decision followed years of concern that senior United Nations figures who were unnamed were swayed by a powerful lobby. We have to assume APAC, Israel, United States, someone like that.
Hmm.
Um, he also was concerned about the humanitarian catastrophe that is growing in Iran because of the destruction of many uh, hospitals, schools, medical facilities, clinics, etc.
Yeah.
We've heard very little about this, but you also shared something with me about the United Nations. Would you like to share that with our viewers?
Yes, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which was charged with the inspection of the Iranian nuclear sites, during the JPCOA that Obama arranged, with Iran to limit its enrichment of uranium-235. Well, that agency, the head of that agency, which never said anything against the bombings of Iran's nuclear sites and nuclear reactors, releasing a certain amount of radioactivity and preventing the repair of the nuclear reactor sites, it would seem. That head of that agency has called for a nuclear bomb strike on the Iranian nuclear facilities that are involved in the enrichment process. So that corresponds, to the threat, that you've announced, coming from the interior of the United Nations itself, which is not only subject, to the Zionist lobby, United States lobby, but also the Gulf States Council. All the Gulf states, that whose U.S. military bases on sovereign U.S. territory within those Arab states of the Gulf. So they have figured it out, that they cannot win against Iran. And so they're in their desperation, they are calling for, it would seem, a nuclear bomb strike against the nuclear facilities of Iran to remove, the potential defense mechanism that Iran could develop if it were to go ahead, and develop a nuclear bomb, because they realize, and the Zionist regime has realized, since a long time, that Iran does have the capability to develop a nuclear bomb, but they haven't done so because of the supreme leaders, Khomeini and Khomeini, uh, fatwa against the development of a nuclear bomb. They consider to be a violation of Islam itself and an anti-human um, device, which could not be condoned. And so as Iran did not develop a nuclear bomb. Now, many elements, within Iran after the assassinations of the supreme leaders, and as a result, the cancellation of the fatwa against nuclear bomb developments, there are many elements, who do want to develop an Iranian nuclear bomb now. And so the Gulf states, are freaking out and they want to bomb, the nuclear development facilities underground, with a nuclear bomb, which might or might not be able to wreak devastation at that profounder, like 10 stories down, inside of a mountain. And so they don't even know if it would work, but they're still willing to try it. So, this is craziness. This is the world is going crazy, and Trump is already crazy, so he's lending his is power to that development. And the Gulf states, are going for it. They're not even, considering, getting rid of the American military bases there that are the reason why, those countries are being bombed in the first place. So, this is getting worse. This whole thing is getting worse. This is turning into a world war. And
Yeah, and let me ask you about the Gulf states. I was listening to a good program. I think people should look for. It's on the internet. It's called Syria Analysis. Syria Analysis. It's on
okay,
every day. And the gentleman was saying a couple of days, yesterday or last broadcast I saw that the Gulf states are essentially supporting Israel. They
yeah,
have the U.S. bases there. The U.S. bases are there to support Israel, even though they claim they're there to support to provide collective security for the Gulf states. The Gulf states are going to have a problem until they renounce their Abrahamic Accord signatures and become more supportive in deeds, not in words, for the Palestinians.
hmm,
But the role of the Gulf state is to support Israel.
yeah,
And this is not said that's never said. When we think about it, what other role do they play beside providing a base for U.S. military bases? Their opposition to Iran, since Iran is the center of international support for the Palestinians. It's just something to consider. That's all.
yeah. Like the rationale for the United States attack on Iran, start off with the proclamation that the United States is fighting on behalf of democracy and freedom, and they want, the Iranian people to achieve their freedom by, overthrowing their government. Well, that government was elected. So, the prospect, of a popular uprising against an elected government there with, mass popular support was, rather dismal. And even that opposition within Iran, the civilian opposition within Iran, refused to take up the challenge, offered by Trump, because they're supporting their own country against the, military invasion from another. So, the United States lost whatever support it had within Iran. And, the elected, government of Iran, has increased its, popular support as a result. And they also have the staunch, unity of the people who are coming out to demonstrate every evening, in spite of the bombings, to support, the government of Iran. Now, okay, so, Iranian government is elected, but Americans don't even know that. They think, they're told that it's a dictatorship, and they believe it, because, they have no media which will tend to tell them otherwise. But, the if you consider, who the allies of the United States are in terms of the Gulf Cooperation Council, all of those countries are dictatorships. None of them have elected governments. The elected governments of Iran and Iraq, which is supporting Iran, are what the United States would call democracies, but they're not, supporting these democracies. They're trying to destroy those democracies because they are against the United States of America. So the whole myth, the whole, like construct, of international diplomacy as being in favor of democracy and freedom is shot through and through right now. But this has not, like been transmitted into the American scene, yet. Not even by the opposition. The anti-war opposition never mentions this, you know. I don't know why.
Well, that's why we have to build a different anti-war opposition.
Yeah.
So please continue.
So um the the disaffection of the quote unquote left, with the United States proclamations in favor of democracy and freedom has extended to the point where, the left has decided not to defend democracy and freedom because that's what the United States claims to be defending. So in order to, oppose, US, propaganda, they are defeating themselves by, not even, raising up the issues, of what real democracy and real freedom is. They've the only thing that the left considers doing is whatever the reactionary fascist regimes say that they are doing. They say that they are opposed to it, and that's like their methodology. They have no sort of strategy. They have no sort of political philosophy that can cope with the claimed objectives of the imperialist powers. All they can think of doing is saying the opposite of what the enemy is saying. And they proclaim, the U.S. administration to be the enemy. Okay, so they're saying that they're opposed to whatever they're saying. So even if the United States, propaganda claims to be supporting democracy, they think that they have to oppose that claim in order to defeat, the imperial power in the first place. So in order to defeat the imperial power, they're claiming to oppose democracy because they say it's false. Well, okay, it's false, in the United States of America, but elsewhere, they can legitimately claim to be supporting democracy and freedom on the part of the Iranians and Iraqis, because in contrast, the allies of the United States are really dictatorships, aristocratic dictatorships, in which, they import, labor from the third world countries, to work for those aristocrats who, sit back, enjoy, their rich lives by uh, exploiting the natural resources of those countries and contributing as a result, to the international yeah, global warming. And they couldn't care less about that. They just want, like
Well,
the money from burning up the planet. So, the opposition to the war has got to sort of, develop a strategy and has to develop a political philosophy that corresponds to its objectives, which it has not done. And therefore, it is defeating itself. And that's the way it is.
well, I was reading something recently which addressed one of your criticisms, and it basically said that for example, the No Kings March. The No Kings March was an international march, an international rally. These basically the United States, a few places in Europe, and the criticism of the march wasn't on the people who came out, but like you're saying, what is the first of all, they came out as individuals. And it was important for people when you come out to a demonstration, you are no longer an individual, you become part of a political force.
Hmm.
That's what demonstration is about, to show the opposition that we have a political force that will mobilize externally outside their homes, outside their apartments, outside their jobs, that we stand for something. That's why you have demonstrations. Okay. So that's an error that Americans have to, well, they had it in the Vietnam War era, but no kings is kind of being manipulated around the Democratic Party. But that's one thing the article was saying. The second thing it was saying was that there are some um, political 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 realities the marchers and the movement has to focus on. That Trump is opposing democracy at home, just like what you're saying. Everything he does is against democracy. Second, it's not about Trump himself, it's about the American government, the American system, because basically the American system is what's attacking Iran, not just Trump, because Democrats aren't. No one's trying to cut the funding. Not really. No one is telling the soldiers don't fight, stay
Yeah.
here, do the jail time. Nobody's saying that. They're saying, they're basically support the war by not saying that they oppose the war and decisively. The third thing that comes from the Democrats aligned with Republicans, and fourth, that those people, the working people, the decent people, have to realize they're the only people that are going to stop this. The politicians are not going to stop this. So those are four things this article was saying about the demonstration, and I think it mirrors in many ways what you're saying, that um, the Gulf states are dictatorships, and they are.
Yeah.
There's no government. It's ruled by a family. And the Iranian and Iraqi governments are not regimes. They're actually governments. They have a prime minister. They have elected bodies, which is what the West says is democracy. And whether it is democracy or not is another question. But I think the point is completely legitimate. I appreciate your sharing that with us. Thank you.
Yeah. The methodology, of the popular movements in opposition to war and dictatorship operate on the basis that whatever the opposing party says, it must be uh, contredit in French, must be opposed by saying the opposite. No nuance involved whatsoever. No analysis of why the reactionaries are saying what they're saying. No analysis of how to formulate an alternative to what they're
Right.
claiming to be, fighting for. No, there's a really sort of a lack of methodological considerations, a lack of strategy. For instance, when the Zionist regime of Netanyahu claims that it's speaking on behalf of the entire Jewish people of the whole world and that they are fighting for Jewish nationals' liberation, what does the opposition say? Even the Jewish opposition, you know, they say, oh, well, we don't want to be Jewish. We want to be Americans, and therefore we oppose Israel because Israel is using a Jewish identity, to fight and cancel, Palestinian national self-determination and liberation. Okay, so all of a sudden, like Jewish national liberation becomes a no-no. Like even though there's been a Holocaust, and Jewish people are attacked frequently. No, no, that's not important, like, and even though, like Jewish sites are being attacked now physically with arms, with bullets and attacking, individual Jewish people, because they are Jewish and not because, they're in the, IDF, the Imperial Death Force of the Zionist regime. No, just because they're Jewish, all of a sudden they're guilty because, that's what the Zionists say, that they're fighting on behalf of the Jewish people. So all of a sudden, the anti-Zionist movement, thinks that they have to be anti-Jewish in order to be anti-Zionist because that's what Israel
Yeah.
says. Like that's pathetic. Like wake up, people. You don't have to, follow, the Zionist, leadership, by claiming to be the exact opposite of what they are saying, because what they're saying, is false in the first place. So, really. And then when I tried to explain, this, to various organizations, what happens? I get expelled. Like even though I'm the co-founder of the Independent Jewish Voices of Canada, which originally was called the Alliance of Concerned Jewish Canadians, together with Professor Michael Benazon, who unfortunately died a year after. When I raised the concerns, about supporting Jewish people as Jewish people and being opposed, to attacks upon Jewish people and the inflated language used, to attack Jewish people, well, I got expelled from the Independent Jewish Voices. And when I was a candidate, for the Quebec Solidaire movement, which I helped to found as well here in Quebec, whereas I was a candidate, in the riding of Darcy McGee, which was 35% Jewish. Well, they parachuted in a candidate that said, oh, the Jews, they're only 19,500 here in the riding, which is, like 35%, of the population. And the candidate that they supported and replaced me with said they don't count. So I raised this, with a former leader of the Quebec Solidaire, at a recent rally, Amir Kadir. And I told him, like I was giving up on the left here. And I said, look what happened to me. I even got expelled from the Quebec Solidaire. And he said, and then I explained to him why and how. And he said that he didn't consider that to be anti-Semitic. Whoa. Well, it's not up to him. Like who cares, whether he considers it to be anti-Semitic or not. I'm standing there as a Jewish refugee, second generation Holocaust survivor, and I'm telling him that this is anti-Semitic, and he won't believe me. Why? Because, you know, he can invent all sorts of reasons. The party at the time said that they got rid of me, because they were trying to achieve a 50%, women candidature uh, statistic. They wanted, half of the candidates, for Quebec Solidaire to be women. Well, they were already, in all of Quebec. In Montreal, there was a slight, slight over representation of men. And so, what man did they choose to get rid of? The only Jewish man that they had, running as a candidate, for the Quebec Solidaire in a Jewish riding, who was opposed, to Zionism and was mentioning Palestine quite often. And they didn't want to do that, because it undermined, their popular support at the time, which did not support Palestine. And so they caved in, and got a candidate, who didn't mention Palestine. So, that's the state of the left. And that's, the better part of the left in Canada, Quebec Solidaire here in Quebec. On the other hand, what has just happened, the Social Democratic Party of Canada, which is a substantial party, something like the Democratic Socialists of America, in fact, the same, social democratic, political tendency, but they have, been they're strong enough, to be part of coalition governments and to have an effect upon legislation by requiring certain concessions to be made, like free dental care for people over 65 years of age in exchange for supporting a government that was supporting Israel. you know, Thanks, but no thanks type thing. But, the NDP, was so reformist, that it did that. However, there's a new candidate that just got elected the leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada, whose name is Avi Lewis, and he is a Jewish anti-Zionist and proclaims himself as such and denounced the genocide in Gaza a long time ago. And now he's the head of the NDP. Plus, the whole team around Avi Lewis just won all the executive positions in the party. We have taken over the Social Democratic Party and turned it into a revolutionary socialist party. And, the media doesn't mention this at all. They don't want to mention it. They want to let people, know that there's an alternative to capitalism available now in Canada. But, during election time, people are going to find out about this. And Avi Lewis, Avi, stands, it's a Hebrew sort of variation of my name, Abraham. So Avi Lewis, um, he is going to make a breakthrough in the Canadian scene. And this is what, like the anti-Zionist movement should be doing elsewhere as well. Because Avi Lewis comes from a Jewish Bundist family. Moshe Lewis came from uh, Poland and represents the original Jewish labor movement, the Jewish labor Zionist, movement of Poland, to which he contributed, by becoming a builder of the social democratic movement here in Canada, which originally was called the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, led by Tommy Douglas, who invented Medicare here in Canada, which is why I'm still alive, basically, because I could have died 3 times if I was an American for the lack of health care. So, the Bundist movement, is now leading the Social Democratic Party of Canada. And, the anti-Zionist movement has got to pay attention to the Bundist movement now, because we have had a great success in electing Avi Lewis as leader of the Social Democratic Party here in Canada. Now, the Marxist left and the Zionists both discount, the Jewish Bund, saying, oh, well, it's not important. Look, they got massacred, because they wouldn't listen to the Zionists and they didn't leave Europe, to go to Palestine. Well, to do that, for a poor working class, Jewish population, it was impossible to do in the first place. The only recourse they had, to survival is to become Antifa. And and the Jewish Bund, was, a major component of the original anti-fascist movement. And they were successful in doing so. In 1905 in Russia, they helped to defeat, the counter-revolution of the Black Hundreds. And they also helped, to, make the socialist revolution of 1917 as well. So the Jewish Bund is here. It has had its success. It is justified, in its political position by what Zionism has become. And yet, the left doesn't recognize the Jewish Bund, for what it is, and refuses to support the Jewish Bundesposition, and instead talk about Jewish supremacy. What is this Jewish supremacy that they're talking about? What? That Jewish people control the world and control the United States of America? It's ridiculous. The Jewish people in the United States of America are 1.5% of the population. And even though they've developed a Jewish bourgeoisie that has contributed to election funds, that doesn't determine the political position in the United States. Because I'll give you a proof. The United States of America is supporting Ukraine against the Russian liberation of the Eastern Russian-speaking territories, which were never part of the Ukrainian nation to begin with. Does the Ukraine have such a powerful and rich lobby that has convinced the United States of America to support the Ukraine against Russia? No, Ukraine has no such lobby. There's a strong, Ukrainian sort of a reactionary movement in Canada, but not in the United States of America. So how did the United States of America come to support Ukraine? Because it would weaken Russia. And Russia is a competitor to the United States' hegemony over the world. So how did the United States of America come to support the Zionist state of Israel? Not because of the Israel lobby, as Marsheimer refers to it, not because of Jewish supremacy and its power, like Epstein or anything like that. No, that's not the cause. The cause of the United States support of Israel is because Israel is a proxy for the United States of America. It is part of the United States of America, even though the Israelis don't have a vote in the American elections. Because, Israel, in order to survive, must depopulate the Arabic population of Palestine in order to occupy it without opposition, to become a hegemonic Zionist-led regime that is basically a dictatorship, even though it calls itself a democracy and has elections, but the elections are only limited to part of the population that is resident in the territory. The half of the population that is Palestinian in the West Bank and in Gaza, they don't have a vote. No way. Even though 20% of the Israeli population are Palestinian and do have a vote, but that vote is marginalized. And the governing coalitions are always an exclusion of the Palestinian parties. So the United States of America supports Israel because Israel is fighting against the Arabic liberation movement. They don't want to have a Palestinian revolutionary movement that is successful in the land of Palestine, originally Canaan, because that would inspire the other Arabic liberation movements to get rid of their dictatorships, in particular in the Gulf states, which are dictatorships, as we've noted previously. So, this idea of a Jewish supremacy, which is, au courant, the sort of, common sort of, like verbiage, of the Palestinian solidarity movement is false. It's not true. And the only thing it does is generate, more anti-Semitism and allows for the legitimization of anti-Semitism as a false anti-Zionism. But, the left doesn't pay attention to that. Why? Because Karl Marx wrote a little pamphlet in 1847 called The Jewish Question. And in that pamphlet, which he never discounted, and which the Marxist movement has never opposed, he claims that capitalism is Jewish. And to get rid of capitalism, you have to get rid of the Jewish, ethos. And so, like him, all Jewish people should just convert to being Lutherans, and assimilate into the general population. Okay, so a lot of Jewish people did do that. They assimilated into the German Jewish, milieu, which, abandoned its Jewish identity. So what happened to those Jewish assimilated population? They got wiped out by the Nazis. Couldn't care less, if they were religiously Jewish or if they were politically Jewish or whatever. As far as they were concerned, they were Jewish. They were different than the German Christian population because they had different ideas, and they were from the Orient originally. And so they were an evil force, that had to be eradicated. And they did. And what did the left do about it during the Holocaust? There was no protest movement in support of the Jewish population of Europe against the Nazis. No way. Not like now, with the general anti-war movements in support of the Palestinians. There was nothing like that during the Holocaust. And the United States of America remained neutral and even, had economic relations with the Nazi regime and helped to build up its strength for, 3 years, until 1943. The United States came in to oppose the Nazis and the fascists. Why? Because, the Japanese fascists had attacked at Pearl Harbor. And why did they attack? Because Japan was put under sanctions by the United States. So, uh, the United States of America is no leader of democracy, is no leader against, anti-Semitism. It's all false. I mean, I could go on and on, but it's just outrageous. I'm sick and tired of this. I'm leaving. Sorry to sort of, get into a diatribe like that, but that's the reality of the situation as far as I'm concerned. And that's, after 77 years of experience in the West here as a second generation Holocaust survivor, refugee. Was I ever asked what it's like, to be a refugee? What, I think as a Jewish refugee in the left? No. No forum, would sort of, open up to hearing such, like an account. No. Was there any sort of, like support, for, oh, yes, what the Zionists cleaned up on, that the left missed out entirely was because of the communist parties, position in support of the Soviet Union, no matter what, even though they were putting down the Jewish Russian population and didn't allow it, to have its own identity, didn't allow the Jewish Russian population in any of the communist-led countries to have any sort of concept of autonomy, either cultural autonomy or national autonomy. Nothing like that, was ever sort of offered, even though it was demanded by the Bund previously. No, nothing like that, So that when the Jewish population of Russia, started its campaign, for "Let My People Go" campaign, who moved in, to support that? Not the Marxist left, not the Communist Party, not even the Trotskyist parties. No, it was the Zionist parties and, the reactionary American regimes in which they said they were supporting, Jewish liberation. And they, of course, and when the Jewish population was finally sort of allowed to leave, by the will of the Communist Party regime, which allowed them, to leave, said, okay, you don't want to leave, you're just too much trouble to bother with, go. And so, but they wanted, and when they left, they didn't want to go to Israel. They wanted to go to the United States of America or to Germany or any other, European country. So what did Germany do? Under pressure from the Zionist lobby, they forbid the Russian Jewish population from coming into Germany. And of course, they had the support of the right wing in that. And, and they were forced, to go to Israel. And Israel, as a result, has a Russian Jewish population of 2 million. Okay? They had nowhere else to go. The United States wouldn't give them a visa. The United States wouldn't even give, Jewish refugees from Europe before, during, and after the Holocaust, visas. My parents only got into Canada because my father had a sister here who was already a citizen and could sponsor us. But all the other Jewish refugees who had no family here, they weren't allowed in. They were barred. And the boat called the SS San Luis was turned back by Cuba, United States, and Canada, which went back to Europe and landed in France, which was then occupied by the Nazis. And a third of those Jewish refugees on that boat were killed in the death camps. Does the left ever talk about that? I've never heard the left talk about that. Does the left ever want to know, what it was like, to be a Jewish refugee fleeing from the Nazis? Does the left ever want to know about, the Jewish Bund and its resistance against the Nazi regimes? Does the left ever celebrate the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of 1943? No. No commemorations. Nothing. So, fuck the left. I'm leaving. I should show you.
Let,
Yeah, Steve.
let me just comment on that. I think that if when there are deficiencies in analysis of a political movement, then it needs to be brought to that movement's attention and fought for a change. Okay, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah,
So everything you mentioned, those of us who want to show real solidarity with Palestine and the support for the movement against oppression of Jewish people need to be aware of it and act upon it.
yeah, yeah. That's what I'm trying to do here and now. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
But there's so much more happening. Like I'd like to show you the postings that I have on my Facebook page, which, by the way, Facebook is the only one that's, supporting the freedom of speech on Palestine.
well,
And yet, leftists are
that's
denouncing,
that's
Facebook, for being a reactionary media outlet, that needs to be, boycotted. Why? And then they mention the word Zuckerberg or Zooked, as if, that's a legitimate criticism. That's not legitimate criticism. That's anti-Semitism. And even Jewish, people, use such anti-Semitic terminology. And even the term Jew used, in American sort of, vocabulary is anti-Semitic. That is the
right.
name of the Jewish people that was put on the yellow star by the Nazis. Jude, Jude. In German means Jew. And that's what they're using to describe me? Even the Jewish opposition people, refer like uh, not in our name. They use the term Jew instead of Jewish. I sent them a note, about this, protesting. No response. Okay. So here I am to denounce them because they're incompetent, you know. So, okay, here, I'll share the my Facebook page here with you.
Okay.
Okay, now, yeah, here we are. Now, of course, I feature the coin put out by the British occupation, which had to recognize Palestine as Palestine, and even in Hebrew on the side there it says Palestine, and in Arabic Palestine as well. So that's proof positive, that Palestine existed and was occupied by the Zionist militias, which carried out massacres in all of the Palestinian villages. I'll show you what the Zionists are doing in the West Bank now as well. There's a video here coming up. This is so funny. Check this out.
The United States can't take care of daycare. That has to be up to a state. We can't take care of daycare. We're a big country. We have 50 states. We have all these other people. We're fighting wars. We can't take care of daycare. It's not possible for us to take care of daycare. Medicaid, Medicare, all these individual things.
Imagine in Iran that instead of spending their wealth, billions of dollars supporting terrorists or weapons, had spent that money helping the people of Iran, you'd have a much different country.
We have to take care of one thing, military protection. The United States can't take.
Like how clear, how more obvious, can you get than that? Oh, this is very interesting.
But it's obvious, Abraham, but it doesn't sink into the consciousness of people. This is my concern about the American consciousness. Everybody is seen as, don't see not everybody. In general, the idea of the ruling class in this country is that we are individuals. That's why Trump can say that. That's the individual state problem. No, it's a collective problem of the American people. Daycare is a collective need for the American people so women can go to work. That's why you have daycare. And so after school, since they can't, there's no bus or whatever, or they need, there's nobody to help the children when they get out of school. They have after school care. Not just daycare, but after school care. Nobody talks about that. after school care. That is a collective need in every state and every school district of the country, period. Medicare, that is a collective need of people to have a healthcare system. But Trump and the ruling class always say, well, that's individual. No, it's collective. And until Americans get it, it's collective. You're not going to have universal health care. No, you're not. You see, it's your problem and my problem tied to your job. Now, if you're ex-military, if you're over a certain age, they give you a little crappy program. But excuse me, the military has a Veterans Administration. That's the one collective health care system for veterans. They have this system called the Veterans Administration. The American people have nothing like this. So people, and no one, the opposition Democratic Party isn't saying, Trump, you're wrong. Yeah. So they're basically in cahoots with what he's saying. So therefore, we don't have any health care. We don't have any after-school care. All we do is fight wars. That's a change in how a country's supposed to be run. You take care of your people first. You fight your wars next. You fight your wars only when you're attacked on your territory. That's when you fight a war. And if America did that, they wouldn't have any wars, would they? No, they wouldn't. Because every war is based on attacking somebody overseas. Every war. No wars are based on anybody attacking America because it doesn't happen. Yeah. That's it. Sorry, I have to throw that in because, we see ourselves as individuals. No, we are a collective society divided into classes. But there are certain things that certain classes have in common, but we see ourselves as different races, different ethnic groups, different cultures. No. You have to have health care. You have to have education. You have to have the ability of people to go to school and feel safe. You have to have that. But the individual's approach to society deny that you are a collective, have any collective interests besides going to war.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah. It's as if, like Trump is declaring that the United States of America exists only for the purpose of waging war. Okay, so
that's what the man just said. That's an important quote. We'll have time. Yes, we do. Then what are you looking my money for then? To just fight for war? No. What do you collect my tax money for then? Because I can't go out paying taxes. It's automatically taken out. It ain't like I can send it in. Because nobody would send it in. And they know that nobody would send it in. They had to do that, It would fall apart. Wait, nobody give you no money. You got to pay your own bills, Anyway, that's my thing about it. That was a very important statement. We don't have the Medicare. He's belittling health care for the people. He has the best health care in the world, this man here. What an insult. You go ahead and get the best doctors, the best specialists, no problem. Okay, and I bet you your wife had health care, had baby care for your son. I'm sure she did. Why the hell can't Americans have child care service before and after school? How dare you? But nobody talks to him in a response like I just said. Even AOC and all those clowns, they don't say anything. This is an insult to everybody in the country. Their silence really indicts them for being phonies. And that's why this show, we don't mince our words. We speak what we think. When you're talking about the lack of respect, the lack of recognition of the issues facing the Jewish people around the world in history by those who are supposed to be progressive, that's legitimate indictment. I'm saying the same thing about people in this country. That statement right there should call for a general strike, for demonstration on Saturday. You can't say that to us, that we don't have a right to health. How dare you? You should say it just like I say. How dare you say it? You're saying we don't have a right to be healthy? How are you out of your mind? Our children can't have health care? Child care before and after school? What world do you live in? Yeah. Say it like that, buddy. Then if people start listening to that party, they sure will.
Yeah. Healthcare is a human right. And in Canada, we've had universal comprehensive healthcare since 1963, But the American concept of individualism is not doesn't treat individuals as a human. They sort of treat the human individual as a corporate entity in which you go and try to make your way in the world to gather as much money as possible to take care of yourself. And that's called freedom. That's called individual freedom, in which, you're supposed to go and take care of yourself, and nobody is supposed to take care of you because you want to be free of anybody else's, care. Really. Like that just, that argument in and of itself, destroys the family. Even though the family is considered to be a sacred institution in the United States as well. So, it's so contradictory. Okay. Now, oh yeah, another point, like the American military, like all these, basically, poor souls who have no other job opportunity are sort of recruited into the US military and given, a socialist, environment in which everything is free and told that they have to go and fight for capitalism. Like, excuse me, but uh, won't anybody speak up and point this out? And excuse me, but how come the anti-war opposition in the United States of America isn't calling upon American militaries, soldiers, to rebel and refuse to obey illegal orders and refuse to support a regime that is sending them to die for nothing other than American billionaires? So, like it could become obvious, if it's stated as such, but the anti-war movement doesn't. They just, like repeat, the same cliches and slogans, from before without sort of, trying to develop anything that actually speaks to the American peoples. And that's why Trump still has 33%, support amongst the American population, because that 33% hasn't heard anything that would convince them otherwise. And where they get their news from Fox News. That's what they listen to, and that's all they listen to. So, like the anti-war opposition has to go and tell them and speak to them and educate them. But no, they're the enemy. They should be beaten down. That's all, they can think about, instead of, actually carrying out a social revolution to educate the population. And that's how you do it, with ideas. Okay, next. Russia, China, and France have blocked the United Nations plan to authorize force in the Strait of Hormuz. This corresponds, to the initiative that you referred to, in which the United Nations is supposedly like preparing to authorize a nuclear bomb attack on Iran in order to forestall its development of a nuclear industry. Okay, next.
May I comment on that, please? Let me comment on that. If this is true, and we have no reason to say it's untrue, but this really puts a hole. It makes the entire United Nations apparatus not only bankrupt, but valueless. You're going to use your good officers to authorize a nuclear strike on a country that has been sanctioned for 47 years by the United States just because they overthrew the Shah, and that's why they're being sanctioned.
Yeah.
That's why. If you're going to authorize or even have a discussion about nuclear attack, whoa, you need to get yourself together really fast, United Nations, because that makes you look like just a headquarters of criminals. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and the Security Council passes a resolution from the Gulf Cooperation Council opposing Iranian riposta. Riposta in French, in English, means counterattacks against the attacks launched from the American military bases in those countries against Iran. So the counterattacks are being denounced by Security Council, but not the initial attacks against Iran in the first place. Okay. Is that what the United Nations is all about? Okay, I understand. Like, got to do something about that. Okay, next. There's the supposed, devastation of the Iranian air defense system has been proven to be a false claim by Trump. And they took down an American attack airplane. It may have been an F-35 or an F-15E. Either one pilot or two pilots are down, and are hiding right now, and everybody's searching for them. And there's even a bounty placed on their capture alive by the Iranian government. So, like those
Well,
planes cannot sort of, intrude into Iranian airspace now, because they can
but
be taken down.
Abraham, I just want to just say this again. The Iranians have every right and responsibility to shoot down every American aircraft.
Yeah.
That is their responsibility defending their national territory. And basically, any state has that responsibility. I didn't even say America has a responsibility. It has an army, has an air force, has missiles. Somebody's coming across, someone's doing something that violates the program. A government can shoot down the planes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, why is that an even issue? I'm not saying it's an issue for you, but, oh, we can't be shot. Yes, you can. You're supposed to be shot down. Why? You're aggressing over the country. It's called national defense. Even the most reactionary government can do it. I don't have to like your government. Unfortunately or fortunately, you can shoot down a plane that covers into your airspace. Yes, you can. You're supposed to.
Hmm.
So while this is where the war really kind of gets on my nerves, because you're saying I can attack your country, kill a senior with his family, bomb him, and I'm supposed to be, it's okay? No, dude, it ain't okay. Okay, in any part of the world, that ain't cool. Okay, so if you find an airplane over here, I got to try and shoot it down. That's what I'm supposed to do, and I hope I hit it. And the pilot dies. Oh well, you shouldn't have been flying over my country. Period. That's all I gotta say about it. And then that isn't said. They have a right to shoot the damn planes down. They're supposed to shoot them down. Let them fly to your country and bomb you, commit or do surveillance. No, 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 no. No. You got to go. Anywhere in the world, it would be not, oh no, our plane was shot down. We're supposed to be doing this. No, dude, you ain't supposed to be doing it. You're supposed to be at home. You're supposed to be at home, going to the Easter Sunday service, hanging with your mom and dad, having the beer and the berry. That's what you're supposed to be, man. You're supposed to be bombing this country. What's wrong with you? Did you think you can just do this with impunity? No, dude. Them days are over. Look at it, man. The average Iranian has a master's degree. Master's degree. They're smart people.
Mm.
This projection of them as being savages. Oh, I hate it. I can't stand it. It's so racist. Okay, it's so much fearful of superiority complex. No, they're very smart people. Okay, they overthrew the Shah, got rid of him. That's pretty smart to me. That's pretty smart. He's gone. Okay, so pilots, seamen, if you come around, I'm not going to use a certain phrase in America, but if you fly over the country, expect for somebody to shoot at you, expect they drone to try and shoot you down, because that's the way it is. And if you don't expect that, then you're gonna find out what the world really is like. This ain't like Venezuela, who you underdeveloped and had a one export economy of oil, pretty much. You just grab the president and grab the president and grab him and his wife and out their beds. I still don't get why that doesn't have much reprehension to me. Grab the president of a country out of his bed and put him in jail in your country. Boy, woo! And now you think we're supposed to be upset when you shoot down. I mean, we're supposed to be upset when one of the planes is shot down. Hey, man, that's like breaking somebody's house.
Yeah.
If he shoots you, you shouldn't have been in his house, man. I'm sorry, man. That's it.
Yeah, and Trump, wants to bomb Iran back into the Stone Age, he says, Iran has 96% literacy for the women of Iran. On Press TV, internet news broadcasts from Iran, the broadcasters are women, including a black woman who's a political analyst, brilliant and strong. The women, like are the spokespersons, for a Press TV. Incredible. And yet they claim, the women are being oppressed, and all this sort of thing, they're doing better in Iran than they are in the United States of America. Where that mouthpiece for Trump, Caroline Levitt, who's been dumped now, can't even answer a question, when she was under questioning in the Congress. And now she's gone. also the chief of staff has been sent away, has been dismissed by Trump. He was, chosen as chief of staff during the Biden administration. I guess, that's one reason. But, the real reason must be that he's opposed, to this military campaign on Iran. And so he's been dismissed. Now he's going to replace him, with some fascist. Okay. The American people have to become aware of this, like I'm sure Fox News isn't, making much of a fuss about that. But right in the middle of a war, the chief of staff, was being dismissed. Like how stupid, like in terms of military, like logistics even, that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, now here's here's a new film about Palestine, exposing, the British military occupation of Palestine and their collaboration with the Zionists. Okay. Have a look at this. The data centers that provide, um, um, military intelligence, for the attack on Iran are being attacked now in the Gulf Arab states. And this is a proof, that there was a successful attack on Amazon here. And the attack on the girls' school in Iran on the first day, that they're trying to sort of, dismiss that as being irrelevant, but the reason why that attack took place is that because they're using a artificial intelligence called Palantir, which chooses targets on the basis of military logic. Now, and those targets are not even reviewed, by a human before they're being sent, to the military, to be used as a target. And why would, Palantir use this, as a target, this girls' school? Because, that artificial intelligence was trained, to use the strategy of shock and awe. This was first used by Bush, in Iraq. And, the military logic is, shock and awe will convince, the population that they cannot win the war, and therefore they should get rid of their political administration in order to surrender to the opposing force. That's the strategy that they use, otherwise known as fascism. Okay, next.
Well, I think I just want real quickly. I was reading. I think it's called TASM, which is an Iranian news site, a couple of days ago, and the school is supposed to be made into a museum. And that's what the current plan is. And I hope that people around the world can find a way to help rebuild it.
Yeah, never
Volunteer
forget.
labor,
Yeah.
volunteer labor, money, whatever, because we just showed people of Iran that people around the world don't like this war, especially the killing of children in school. Not just unacceptable. Sorry.
It's never forget, never forgive, and never again. That's the way it should be. Here is a video from the Zionist military itself in Hebrew, showing them picking up, the casualties of the war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're being hit. They're being hit hard. Hezbollah knows what to do, with them. They've gotten rid of the Zionist occupation of southern Lebanon before, and they're doing it again.
And I think again, Abraham, your admonition last week that the entire war has to be seen on those three fronts: the Iranian front, the Lebanese front, the Houthi front. There's not just the war against Iran; it's also being carried out in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Iran, and it will be added. Yemen will be added next.
Yes, and also to include in that list Iraq. So that makes it a five-front war: Iran,
Right. Yes.
Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Gaza, and the West Bank. That's
Right.
six-front war.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think they can get away with that. They're going to
No.
be defeated. Here's a hypersonic missile attacking an Israeli oil depot or something like that. or oil refinery plant. Devastation, complete devastation. And it's not stopping. It's continuing and it's becoming more accurate.
And let me again mention to you that majority of Iranians have master's degrees, which means to me, this whole thing about the hypersonic missile, oh, wow, how could they do that? Because they're a smart nation. That's why, dummy.
Yeah.
They're not trying to import sex workers like in Israel, the United States. They're not trying to dumb down the curriculum in the schools. Israel, United States schools don't score too high on like the international test, by the way. Most people never look at that, but I do. So these missiles that they have in the DPRK and in Russia and Iran, because they have an intelligent population who's dedicated to science, who's dedicated to maybe more conservative way of living. But when it comes to defend themselves, they obviously have done pretty good, haven't they? Oh, yes, they have. Thank you.
For sure. I mean, that's, a 5,000-year-old civilization there. American civilization is what, 250 years?
Yeah. How are you supposed to even say that you're equal? You should be saying, what can I learn from you? You've been around from millennia. I'm just a young upstart of a country. Let me sit down and listen to you. I'm sure I can learn something. But no, you want to go overthrow the country. No, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. Okay, here's a video from the West Bank. These are Zionists invading a Palestinian village, coming into a shop that seems to be selling tiles or something. And the military is supposed to be stopping these hoodlums from doing this. But
the military gives them support and prevents reinforcements coming in to stop the settlers. The settlers, yeah. The settlers have to be seen as the settlers should be seen the same light as the colonists in the United States. I came with that this week. They're the same as the colonists. Okay? You gonna tell me that Native people didn't receive the same treatment as the Palestinians do, but from settlers? Don't even start with that. That's how I see settlers, as colonists in the United States. And the way they treat Palestinians and Arab people in general is the way that the Americans treated the Native people. It has to be.
Yeah.
Because they're the most violent. They're the most violent.
Like Klan, this is like Ku Klux Klan, activity.
Yes. That's what it is. It's Ku Klux Klan activity. Yes, that's what it is.
Mass, just like the Klan, like same sort of, mentality. Yeah. Okay, next. This is important. This is an article that I copied into here. I couldn't give a link, because Facebook doesn't allow links to news sources, because the news sources want to charge Facebook for using their links. Anyway, a new resistance front in Syria. Syria now, like there's more smuggling of weapons, into Lebanon to Hezbollah from Syria than before during the Assad regime. And the leftists, they're so worried, that the axis of resistance had lost, their big supporter, Assad. Assad was useless and nothing but a drug pusher. That's where they were getting their money from some particular drug, amphetamine that they were selling and producing. So, and then here is a new profile that I recommend, on academia.edu. These articles, from Steve Johnson have to be looked at because they're going to be consistent, valid source of information. Next. Oh yeah, this is the your story that you sent me the information about the UN official who resigned, over the plans, to nuclear bomb Iran. And then I added in the information about the guy from the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is supposed to be preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons and actually promoting its use. Okay. Yeah, this is a backup story, saying how the Zionist settlers in the West Bank are trying to expel all the Palestinians from the West Bank. They want to annex all of that territory. Okay, it just goes on and on, like this is too much. So that's the way it is here and now.
Okay. Well,
And
we covered quite a bit today. We covered quite a bit. And I think
yeah,
that's one that makes this program different is we do cover quite a bit. And we're always trying to speak the truth, put humanity first, put the oppressed first, and our desires for the liberation of the oppressed. And that's why we're here.
yeah, to develop a revolutionary socialist movement with strategy and political philosophy that suits the times. We don't need to repeat, cliches and slogans and talking points, from the past. We have to, you know, be connected, with the present here and now and know what to say, when to say it, how to say it, and not be afraid to say it. And that's what we're doing here.
That's it. Okay.
Share. Thank you. Bye for now.